The Mahabharata of Sri Krsna Dvaipayana Vyasa, Adi Parva, Part 5. In an effort to continue the Kuru family dynasty through the wombs of Vichitravirya's widows, Ambika and Ambalika, Bhishma had told his stepmother Satyavati of an ancient Niyoga tradition in which an exalted man, usually a great sage, is called upon to impregnate a woman whose husband is impotent or who has died. Bhishma told Satyavati, "My dear mother, I will leave the matter up to you. However, it is my suggestion that we request a Brahmana to beget children upon Vichitravirya's 2 widows." When Satyavati heard this, she remembered her own past and began to smile bashfully. She then expressed approval of Bhishma's plan by saying, "I had also begotten a glorious son by accepting the fond embraces of a great personality. I have carefully guarded this secret, but now I shall disclose the truth to you. Once, before my marriage to your father, Maharaj Shantanu, the great rishi Parashara Muni became enamored by my feminine beauty, and as a result of our union, Vyasadeva was born. After birth, as my son prepared to depart for the forest, he told me, 'Just think of me whenever you are in difficulty, and I shall appear before you at once.' O Bhishma, I think that Vyasa should be summoned now and requested to beget children upon Vichitravirya's widows." Bhishma highly approved of this idea. Thereafter, when Satyavati began to meditate upon Vyasadeva with a concentrated mind, the son of Parashara instantly appeared before her. As Satyavati bathed him with her tears while fondly embracing him, Vyasadeva assured her that he was prepared to fulfill the purpose for which he had been called. Satyavati then seated her son, and after making the usual polite inquiries, she said, "Because of the death of my husband and 2 sons, and because of Bhishma's vow never to marry or produce children, the Kuru dynasty is in danger of becoming extinct. O Dvaipayana, since you are my eldest and only remaining son, I request you to beget children through Vichitravirya's widows, Ambika and Ambalika, so that our family dynasty may continue." Vyasa replied, "My dear mother, I accept your proposal, for it is consonant with virtue. Still, the 2 widows must first undergo austerities for 1 year, since no woman should approach me like this without having completed rigid vows." Satyavati was very anxious and impatient, however, and so she urged, "My son, please act so that the girls may conceive immediately, for without a proper king, a kingdom remains in a precarious condition." Finally, Vyasadeva relented, saying, "All right, if the ladies are able to bear the dirtiness of my body and dress, my strong odor, and my overall grim appearance, then that certainly may be counted as their austerity. My dear mother, if the 2 widows agree to embrace me, then the children that they conceive will come to be great personalities. Go now and tell Ambika that when her time of conception arrives, she must wait for me in her bedchamber. At that time, make sure that Ambika dresses herself in clean clothes and is adorned with nice ornaments." After saying this, Vyasadeva disappeared from that place. Satyavati then went to Ambika and it was only with great difficulty that she was able to convince her to accept the proposal. Thereafter, when Ambika's time for conception arrived, Satyavati had her bathed and nicely dressed. Then, after leading Ambika to her bedchamber, Satyavati said, "The elder brother of your deceased husband will come here tonight to beget a child in your womb. Make sure that you await his arrival without falling asleep." As Ambika lay in her bed that night, she passed the time imagining what kind of man would visit her that evening. Indeed, with a heavily beating heart, Ambika expected that she would soon be engaged in amorous love with a great Kshatriya hero. Then, as Ambika was thinking in this way, Vyasadeva suddenly entered the room. When Ambika saw Vyasadev's matted hair, grisly beard, and blazing eyes, she closed her eyes out of fright. Even as Vyasadeva proceeded to inject his semen into her womb, Ambika did not dare open her eyes even once to look at her partner. Then, when Vyasadeva left Ambika's bedchamber, after finishing his business, he found Satyavati anxiously waiting for him to find out what had happened. At that time Vyasadeva informed his mother, "The son that I have given to Ambika will be endowed with the strength of 10,000 elephants. In addition, he will have great intelligence and become very learned, and he himself will produce 100 sons. However, due to the fault of his mother, this glorious son will be born blind." At this, Satyavati exclaimed, "A blind son cannot become the king! O foremost of rishis, you must produce one more son, otherwise our whole intention is frustrated." Vyasadeva agreed to beget another son and then departed. Thereafter, in due course of time, Ambika gave birth to her blind son, who was born as such because she had kept her own eyes closed. Satyavati then approached Ambalika and convinced her to unite with her deceased husband's elder brother. As with Ambika, when Ambalika's time for conception arrived, she had expectations of receiving the affections of a powerful and handsome Kshatriya warrior. Thus, when Vyasadeva entered her bedroom for the purpose of having sexual relations, upon seeing his unkempt appearance, she became pale with fright. Later, when Vyas came out of Ambalika's bedroom, he once again found Satyavati eagerly awaiting him. This time, Vyasadeva explained, "Because of her fault of fearfulness, the son that I have given to Ambalika will have an exceptionally pale complexion, and thus will receive the name Pandu." Because of this, Satyavati was still not fully satisfied, and so she begged her son Vyas to produce just one more child. As before, Vyasadeva agreed and then departed. Thereafter, in due course of time, Ambalika gave birth to a pale-complexioned son who was endowed with all auspicious bodily symptoms. Then, when Ambika's time for conception again arrived, Satyavati approached her and requested that she have sexual intercourse with Vyasadeva once more. Out of duty, Ambika consented, but later on, when she thought about Vyasadeva's grim appearance and strong bodily odor, she asked her beautiful maidservant to take her place. Thus, when Vyasadeva was summoned by Satyavati and entered Ambika's bedchamber, he found that he was very respectfully received by the Shudrani maidservant. Vyasadeva was very pleased by the Shudrani's submissive and amiable behavior, however, and so, at the conclusion of their union, he informed her, "Your son will be very fortunate, and he will come to be known as the most intelligent man on earth." Thereafter, as previously, Vyasadeva found Satyavati anxiously awaiting him, and so he informed her of how he had been deceived by Ambika, and thus had begotten a son upon her Shudra maidservant. After saying this, Vyasadeva suddenly and mysteriously disappeared from his mother's sight. This son of Vyasadeva by a maidservant was actually Yamaraj, the Lord of Death, who was forced to take birth as a Shudra, or one of the laborer class, because of being cursed by Mandavya Muni. The great rishi Mandavya Muni used to perform austerities by observing a vow of silence while sitting at the entrance of his cottage with both arms raised above his head. After Mandavya Muni had been sitting in that way for a number of years, it so happened that one day some thieves entered his ashram after stealing some wealth, and out of fear they began to hide there. Soon after, the king's agents came there in pursuit of the thieves, and they asked Mandavya Muni if he knew of their whereabouts. In order to keep his vow, the rishi remained silent. Still, the king's men managed to find the thieves concealed in Mandavya Muni's ashram, and so they arrested him as well, considering him to be an accomplice to the crime. When the culprits were brought before the king, he ordered that all of them be executed, including Mandavya Muni. However, when the officers carried out the king's command and pierced Mandavya Muni with a lance, the rishi miraculously did not die due to the power of his austerity. Then, while remaining tied to the stake, Mandavya Muni summoned some other rishis who quickly came there in the form of birds. When these rishis asked him why he had been punished so severely, Mandavya Muni replied, "This must certainly be the result of a past sinful act." Meanwhile, the officers went and informed the king of how Mandavya Muni did not die, in spite of being pierced by their lance. The king then consulted with his ministers, and in accordance with their good advice, he went to Mandavya Muni and begged for forgiveness for his great offense. Mandavya Muni became pacified by the king's genuine repentance. Then, when the king tried to extract the lance from Mandavya Muni's body, he was unable to do so in spite of his best efforts. At last, the astonished king simply cut off the lance at the point where it entered the rishi's body. Thus, when Mandavya Muni departed, he retained the portion of the lance that was immovably lodged in his body. Mandavya went back to performing austerities, and then, later on, it so happened that he once journeyed to the abode of Yamaraj, the Lord of Death. When he came before Yamaraj, who was seated upon an opulent throne, the rishi Mandavya took the opportunity to inquire, "O Lord Yamaraj, what sinful act did I commit in the past so as to be punished so severely by the king?" Yamaraj replied, "O rishi, you once pierced an insect with a sharp blade of grass, and thus, as a reaction, you were pierced in a similar manner." Mandavya then asked, "O Yamaraj, how old was I when I committed this sinful act?" When Yamaraj informed Mandavya Muni that he had pierced the insect as a child, the rishi became very angry. He responded, "The punishment that you inflicted upon me was disproportionate to the sin committed, especially when you consider that the killing of a brahmana, such as myself, is the most sinful of all actions. For this foolishness, I hereby curse you to be born as a Shudra upon the earth. In addition, from this day onward, I order that any sin which is committed by a person below the age of 14 will not be subject to a reaction.